All right, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy 360 Stacks in this thing, baby, representing TKOG. And today I'm going to be going over my Sky Striker list. This is an update. I've tested many different variants. The variant that I had the most fun with was definitely the Brave Therion Sky Striker list. It was 60 card gas. It was amazing. It was very fun. And honestly, I'm not coming at you with that list today because I actually did have to sell a lot of my Yu-Gi-Oh cards to get the money for my car. And I don't regret it. Real life over Yu-Gi-Oh all day, every day. I'll eventually be able to get those cards back, but I actually like this list more than that list for the simple fact that I was just seeing what I wanted to see more often. I went more towards just like a pure striker build, how I had originally, but I kept the Therion cards in because they did give me coverage that this deck just did not have. It had no way to protect its back row at all. Like, you did not have protection from like Evenly and Twin Twisters and just cards that would hit your floodgates post-siding. And you really needed that. You can't just rely on like RNGing into Solemn Judgment, you know what I mean? So it's that alone was enough reason for me to play the Therion cards, outside of them just giving you an insanely kind of oppressive grind game, because you're adding that factored with how Sky Strikers already operate. I mean, there's soft locks with there can be only one in Therion Disc Coliseum, where like you literally, it's just insane. Like, it's so cool what this deck is able to do. And with such little resources, you're able to accumulate a lot of advantage. And it's not just advantage that just stops. It's just a snowballing factor. It's a plethora of resources that will continue to funnel in through the duration of your turn, your opponent's turn, and back to yours. It's just a full circle, and it's a really, really good engine, just in general. Before I get any further into this, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. Click a like and a note. Go ahead and drop a comment in the video. Just help the algorithm out. If you're going to subscribe, click the notification bell. Make sure that you do that, definitely. If you want to support this channel, I have the links in the description box of every video that I upload. I copy and paste the link to my Patreon and to my Discord. If you want to join either or to help your boy out, definitely do so. Those are both mutually beneficial. We both eat off of them. I'm just letting y'all know in advance. But let's get started. So yeah. What I really love about Striker, and the keyword this format for me, as I've been studying and just playtesting more, is coverage. This is a very healthy and diverse format. So what that means is the decks that you're going to want to play this format are not always going to want to, you're not always going to want to pilot like an anti-meta hard counter to one certain deck kind of strategy. Because this isn't like a deck where, this isn't a format where like there's one or two decks that are just so good that they outperform every other deck by a vast margin. You know, this is a very wide open format where there's just so many different archetypes that are performing extremely well, and some of it is due to supplemental and splashable engines that just kind of raise your ceiling and enhance the capabilities of an already good deck. So the decks are already good, and they're just getting better with the incorporation of certain cards with the generic applicability. And this deck's able to do that as well. But with all that said, the reason why I mention that is because this deck in particular is not like that. This is why I like Strikers, because you can easily play a deck that hard counters Despia. You can play a deck that hard counters Flunderies. You can play a deck that hard counters Sword Souls, or any Punk decks, or Dragon Link decks, or Drytrons, or anything like that. But your problem is going to be, your deck might be good against that deck exclusively, but you're not guaranteed to have that in all of your matchups, especially in a large tournament. You know, so you want a deck that has really good coverage in multiple matchups, and those aspects are what makes Striker so good. They have such good coverage in a lot of different matchups. The deck's weaknesses truly are definitely just going to be, it can sometimes fold to back row removal with a hand that's not strong enough, and it doesn't really have the high level of consistency that other archetypes have. You know, this deck's biggest weakness, I would say, is just not drawing a starter, not drawing a way to Ray, but that weakness is every deck's weakness. No deck can perform without drawing their engine. This deck's just not as consistent as others, so that's why it's more noticeable when you play this deck than when you play others. But that's not to say that this deck isn't good, because everything that this deck is able to do, it does it extremely well. It's like a jack of all trades, master of none. Some decks are just really good at a few things, but Strikers are good at everything that they can do, and they can do a lot of the same things that other decks can do. They just do it in a different way. This is a deck that rewards technical play, skillful play. This is a deck that rewards patience. Properly navigating boards with this deck is not as easy as when you're piloting other decks, and it's because this deck does have a lot of options. Its kit and its toolbox is very versatile. It's diverse. There's a lot of utility and just kind of applicability with all the Striker cards. You know, the functionality of them, like I said, it covers so many matchups. You've got cards like Afterburners, cards like Widow Anchor, These cards just give you coverage in almost every single matchup, being able to out impins, barrier statues to one-for-one trades with cards like Savage and Hot Red and Griffin Rider, and just having cards like Shark Cannon to be able to steal people's bearing the floors, their Arc Lights, their Therion King Regulus. This deck just has such a good engine. Its toolbox is just able to use the cards that your opponent has as like a double-edged sword against them, which is extremely oppressive in certain situations. I mean, there is just so many different matchups where Striker is sometimes better than it should be just because of that matchup. And that's literally simply because of Shark Cannon's ability to take your opponent's cards like their ABC Dragon Buster, just the ability to clear your opponent's boss monster with cards like Afterburner and take it back from them with Shark Cannon makes this deck even better. You have that totally awesome-esque kind of play. It's just really, really strong. Like I said, I just think this deck just has such great coverage, and that's why I really, really like it. It's a mid-range deck. It's not really going to just combo off turn one and set up this unbreakable board. And it's extremely good with making one-for-one trades against any deck. It's very, very favorable in that regard, because just with one Ray alone, every turn you can trade through upwards of 2 to 3 disruptions. Because there are points and in your line of play where your opponent will have to respond to both Hayate, Kagari, and Shizuku. In certain scenarios, Kagari is a guaranteed way to force an interruption, because if Kagari's targeting like a Widow and your opponent has a Savage, they have to stop the Kagari. Otherwise, the Widow's just going to negate. It's just going to trade with the Warlord Savage anyways. So it's just very, very strong. It's always going to have really good follow-up, and that follow-up snowballs out of control. It makes a full circle, like I was saying earlier. You'll get advantage on your turn, your opponent's turn, and your turn, and so on and so forth. So all that said, that little synopsis on Striker, take it or leave it. You could skip towards the deck profile if you want, or be mad because it's been this long in the video and there hasn't been a deck profile yet. But I say all of that for a very good reason, because not everybody watching this video knows much about Striker or really, really wants to play it. And that might just give you a little bit of inspiration to want to try the deck out. So here's my list. And there's very good reasons for why I explain what I explained, because that right there, that mindset that I was mentioning, just having good coverage, that's why I built this deck the way I built it, because I didn't want to give it a more favorable specific matchup. I just wanted my deck to always have a favorable matchup at all times, no matter what deck I'm playing against. So for my Striker engine, I am playing 3 Raid, 3 Rose, 1 Rhoda, 1 Engage, 1 Hornet Bit, and also 1 Area 0. These are all the starters that the Striker engine has. You can up the count on Area 0 just to get a higher chance of seeing Striker cards, but ideally, the way I play this deck, I have hand traps and supplemental engines to make sure that even if I don't always draw the best, I'm able to defend myself until I can. So with that said, I also want to mention that I am missing 2 Triple Tactics talents and also my Terraforming, because I did put them in my storage unit while I'm waiting for my move on August the 4th. So I don't have all my cards, but I do have fillers, because I typically do play 3 copies of talents in my deck, because it's like it covers what Mind Control and Change of Heart do. It gives me coverage on those kind of effects. It gives me coverage on not playing Pot of Desires or Prosperity. And in addition to that, the ability to look at hand is just something that this deck can't do. So for me, Triple Tactics Talents is always going to be better than any of those cards, because you can always force it to be live when you're playing a blind second deck. It's just one of the best cards you could play in Striker. It's better than Droplets in a lot of circumstances. And then this is the Therion engine right here. 3 Field Spell, 2 Regulus. I have definitely tested 1 Regulus, and the second one comes up a lot more than you think. So it's just really, really important to play 2. I just like the loop when you have the soft lock, just having the ability to have 1 on field, add 1 back, keep pitching the same one off of him. And it's just really, really strong when you haven't seen your Striker cards yet. Something else that's really, really cute is how this interacts with Hayate. It's really, really strong, you guys. There's so much advantage that you can get just drawing a Ray and a Therion Disc Coliseum together. It's insane how much advantage you get off the initial front of those cards, and then every turn through the duration. It's really, really strong. You have cards like Shizuku and Disc Coliseum. It's already so hard for this deck to be OTK'd, especially when you factor in like Eagle Booster. But then even without Eagle Booster, just having Coliseum and Shizuku with Ray and Grave, it's just really, really hard to... It's not like the board's unbreakable, but it's so hard to navigate that little wall that you have set up when you have cards like Anchors, Shark Cannons, Hand Traps. You have Regulus trading with one of their play starters. It's just really, really good, you guys. I'm also playing Set Rotation. I play Set Rotation and Terraforming in this list, but my Terraformings are in my storage unit. So I'm just playing the set rotation right now. I'm showing you guys the list with what I have right now. And I definitely, like I said, I do normally play Terraforming in the 2 other talents, so I just swapped out those 3 for some filler real quick. But it's not really filler. I just upped Coliseum to 3. And like I said, I was testing 1 Regulus, but actually I like having him at 2 now. It's really, really strong. Set rotation is also sometimes a better starter than Area 0, specifically because of the Afterburners interaction. You can actually give yourself Mystic Mine and give your opponent Area 0, and you can just pop your Area 0, and you will get its effect to summon Ray. And you have Ray with Mystic Mine, you know, you have everything you need. You don't need to deck your opponent out, you can just play. And the way you're going to play is just that you're the only one that can play until your opponent links it to like an Axis Code Talker. And you're just going to, it's okay, you're just going to be okay with that situation. Because you could easily just Widow. So what's going to happen here is since we're playing the 1 Triple Tactics talents, one of the cards that ended up getting bumped up was actually the Afterburners. So I typically play 2 Afterburners, but honestly, I'm not going to lie. With me modifying my ratios because I'm missing the talents and the terraforming, I want to find a way to keep in the cards that I put in as replacements and just takes other stuff out. Because testing, every time I test 3 Afterburners and go back, I really notice the difference. This is one of those cards where this gives you incredible matchups against like back row centric decks, and strikers are not really infamous for being incredibly good against trap decks. Like Ray's good for trading with a lot of interruptions, but Afterburners gives you coverage against floodgates. Anything that's not anti-spell, Afterburners can clear it. If you're able to clear even your own monsters, sometimes I will literally pop my own Hayate just to clear a skill drain. And it's worth it. It really is. So Afterburn is extremely powerful, especially with the Brave engine being just so eccentric in the forefront of the meta. Any deck that can play it is going to play it. It's going to cover you clearing Colosseums, because you definitely don't want to give your opponent free advantage when you don't have to. So this card is just so good right now. It's very, very powerful even in the Flinder matchup. When you're able to clear both Impin and the map, it's just literally like a hard reset. It's like back to square one. It's really, really good. It stifles them in the sense that they can't just progress the game state any further. They have to reestablish what they had lost first before they can take any steps forward, which is a really big deal. And you do all of that with just one Afterburner. This card is just so good right now. It's high-key cracked. I'm also obviously playing the 3 Widows. So these are all engine cards. These are like my starters. I always keep talents in the category of a starter, even though it's also going second card. And literally the remainder of my deck is all going second cards. And the reason why this deck is so good blind second is because a majority of the Sky Striker cards are only good when interacting with cards your opponent has. So the reactive aspect of this deck is actually, it's rewarding. It's gratifying that this deck is so reactive, because if it were a proactive deck, you wouldn't be able to blind second, because proactive playstyles are meant to prevent actions from happening. So that's where you're playing a deck like Eldritch, where you're trying to put up floodgates to not let your opponent make a board. But this deck, being as reactive as it is, you want your opponent to make somewhat of a board, and you're going to break it. You're going to take their follow-up. If they have any graveyard follow-up with cards like Shark Cannon, you're going to take their resources away, and you're going to put them on a clock where they have 1 to 2 turns to try to kill you before the snowballing gets out of control, and they either have to scoop or they just get OTK'd. And that's just how this deck operates. It doesn't have a definitive win condition per se, but I would just say it like this. The best way to describe it is like with Thunder. Once you get going, it's just really hard for you to stop. So once you have that plethora of advantage, the only decks that are really going to be able to keep up is a deck that has a similar snowballing aspect and is able to also interact with your disruptions while being able to still keep that gas going. So double Shark Cannon in this format is definitely a must for me. And I definitely like Ego Booster this format. I teched it back in. I was like, it's just every time I take certain cards out, I really notice the difference. And it's like, I don't really feel like it's necessary per se to it's not like you really need Ego Booster every matchup. But what made me want to tech this back in was I was having a rough time against Sword Soul in certain instances where I would literally break their board and I would have my own. I would have a Shiz getting me an Engage on end phase, which, need I mind you, if you guys didn't know this already, I'm just going to lace you up right now. You should never be dumping Engage off Hayate, nor adding it off Kagari. You want to be adding Engage off of Suzuku. You want to, every single time. You're going to get more value, more mileage out of it. You get 2 Engage activations instead of 1. And you're not burning a Hayate or a Shizuku, or a Kagari in the process to get 1 Engage. So that's how I typically do it. And it was like I had the setup for game, but they were always finding a way to just play through like a Widow, with like Heavenly Dragon Circle, and then they would like shuffle my cards back, and then they would stop Ray with Berserker, and it was just really, really hard to survive. And I was like, dude, if I just had an Eagle Booster, I wouldn't die. Like, I wouldn't die. It wouldn't even matter how much damage that they put up. As long as I just had an Eagle Booster and like 1 or 2 defensive cards, I would force them to play around my defensive cards, and I would just flip the Eagle Booster at the end. And that to me is just all I need, because against Sword Soul, if they cannot ulti-K me on their following turn, they don't have any way to play the game that my deck's designed to play. So I'm basically, this deck's able to literally just thrive in so many different tempos. But it's not just that, it's that this deck can force the tempo, right? This deck can literally change the entire dynamic of how this matchup should be played. You could be like, this is not supposed to be happening, but that's just how it is with Striker. It will make it happen whether you like it or not. It can force a simplified game state. Whether you're prepared for it or not, this deck is able to do it. And it can also force it to be a much more fast-paced and just hyperactive game state, because your cards are able to be just, they're able to fill gaps and voids that just other cards just really can't do. So the multi-purpose functionality of these cards is what makes it able to do that, in my opinion. So lastly, we have multi-roll. I never play Striker without multi-roll. I don't care if people feel like they're good without it or good with it. It doesn't matter. The card's just so powerful. It's literally like, it's almost like a better Called by the Grave for this deck. This card's always going to force negates. And when you have multi-roll up and your opponent is trying to break your board and they don't clear this, you're starting your turn with a free way to just say no. It's just really, really strong. It's like Ultrageist Protocol. And then their hand traps that we're playing. And hand traps are good in this deck because your opponent's always going to side back row removal against you anyways. And if you didn't draw Regulus to protect you from the back row removal, you're going to need hand traps to play defensively to at least buy yourself another turn. So we have 3 Nib, which is just a godsend this format, as well as Ash Blossom. These 9 hand traps particularly are the best hand traps this format, in my opinion. They cover every single matchup that matters, and that's literally all that matters. I do play double Valor. I just like Valor. If I'm not playing Halkseline, I feel like Valor's not as valuable. But I am playing Halkseline, and that just gives Valor that multi-purpose functionality that I was mentioning. We play double Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre has such good coverage right now. I've been considering playing 3. It's just been such an incredible card. And lastly, just 1 Mystic Mine. This card was also at 2 at one point. There was a point when I was playing 3, and I keep changing my ratios because honestly, this is a nice to have, not a need to have. When you're playing Striker, people already expect this card, so the more heavily you focus on playing this card and utilizing it to just get the advantage that, or the value that you want out of a Mystic Mine playstyle, the more you're playing into the trap that your opponent already has set up for you because they expect this card. So if your deck is basically allocating all these slots just to make Mystic Mine more oppressive or more, just to give you a higher odd of seeing it, you know, the issue is going to become that back row removal that was already so good against your deck is now just going to kill you, because if you're leaning on Mystic Mine and they out it, odds are you don't have any way to defend yourself because you're trying to either deck them out or maybe you're just waiting for your chance, you know what I mean? So the way you want to play Mystic Mine in this deck is you can use it defensively to get yourself a couple turns, but you don't want to sit on it too long. But the way I play it typically is just to turn off monster negations and interruptions, and I just play my Striker engine with mine up. I don't care if my opponent summons an access code and now they have more the same exact number of monsters that I do, because really all I care about is that they're not able to play it. And that's all that matters. You know, if I'm simplifying the game state with my engine and I'm putting my opponent in a position where they can't actually progress or reestablish or get any kind of advantage from their follow-up, because it could be monster effects in the gray that are getting them that recursion, that's a big deal. So even if they do set up the access code, and maybe I have the Widow, maybe I don't, and maybe they like are able to clear the Mystic Mine, all that matters is that I put them in that predicament with the monster that they had to be used to make access code, and they couldn't get the value that they wanted. So I love this card. This card literally breaks boards in more ways than one, because if my opponent has 4 monsters and they link them all in the access code, this card just basically just Nibiru with them when you really think about it. It's insane how good the card is, but it's not a crutch. It's just something that's a nice to have versus a need to have. And then extra deck, just 3 Kugari, 3 Shiz, 2 Hayate. I sometimes want 2 Zeeks, but I'm okay with 1. I've been okay with 1 for a while. And then the 1 Kaina. Kaina's a lifesaver. The fact that this deck has a win condition in time via Hayate or Kaina is really, really strong. We have Phoenix. We also have the Unicorn just for some utility. And then obviously the Hulk Celine access code. It's too good to not play. It just makes Shark Cannon that much more powerful. Shark Cannon can turn into an OTK out of nowhere. If your opponent hand trapped you with a tuner hand trap like Valor, Ogre, Ash, etc., you know, you can just kill them now with your Shark Cannon, which is really good. So that's the deck profile, you guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something from this video. And at the end of the day, you know, this is just for all of us to eat and for all of us to grow and get better as players. So thank you guys so much. Y'all have a wonderful day. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay safe out there. Peace.